In some ways, I wanted this to be kind of a letter to my son. My dad wrote a book before he died and about his family growing up in Mississippi and the history of his family. And because he died when I was so young, that really became like a letter to me. And it's a letter I reread every year. And a lot I know of my dad came from that book. And a lot of that I know about his family's history came from that. And I wanted to kind of write a letter to Wyatt about this fascinating and crazy and unusual part of his family's past. And good evening, thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with breaking news on the...
Anderson Cooper has been a broadcast journalist for more than a quarter century and has won 18 Emmys along the way. But the 54-year-old host of CNN's Anderson Cooper 360 has also published 2 best-selling memoirs. In 2006, Dispatches from the Edge, about his life and work covering some of the biggest stories of the day. And in 2016, The Rainbow Comes and Goes, a mother and son on life, love, and loss, which he co-wrote with his famous mom, Gloria Vanderbilt.
What's nice about it is people have an idea of maybe what you're like, but it's not really the reality of what you're like, and I think this is very much your
Well,
voice.
there's absolutely not one untruth in it. I mean, it's completely, there's nothing edited in it, you know, so it's
very raw.
Now on September 21st, Anderson is releasing book number 3, Vanderbilt, The Rise and Fall of an American Dynasty, which he's written in conjunction with historian Catherine Howe. The book chronicles one of the wealthiest families in American history, a family to which Anderson and his son Wyatt happen to belong.
It's not all of his past, but it's a part of it, and I wanted him to kind of have my perspective on it. And in order for me to have a perspective on it, I really had to start doing research and reading about it, and which I never had before. As a kid, I really didn't want, as a kid, my mom didn't really talk much about her childhood, about her past. It was very painful for her. It was only later in life that she really began to write about it and talk about it. And so I grew up not really knowing much about the Vanderbilts, and the little I did know was, you know, that they were very wealthy and that they had spent a lot of money and built enormous palaces, and some of those were museums, but a lot of them had disappeared. And it was always this question in my mind of like, what happened to them?
The dynasty began with Anderson's great-great-great-grandfather, Cornelius Vanderbilt. Nicknamed the Commodore, the future railroad magnate was born in 1794 in Staten Island, New York.
The Commodore Vanderbilt, who is the one who created the fortune, you know, started out, it's a very kind of American Horatio Alger kind of story. Started out on Staten Island, the son of a farmer who was not very successful, a pretty small farmer, and, you know, started with one small little boat ferrying supplies, literally poling it in shallow water between Staten Island and Manhattan, and built amassed more money than anybody in the world had ever seen at that time. And we all grew up with that mythos of the self-made person. And I wanted to kind of explore that and see how much of that is true, how much of it is just mythology that Commodore Vanderbilt created about himself and that eager reporters also created back then. And also the ripple effects of that kind of success in one generation and what the ripple effects of it might be over the course of subsequent generations. But I think it's it's the same reason we love to watch The Crown on Netflix, because it's a multi-generational, fascinating story with characters who have flaws and also do extraordinary things, and it's a very human story. I think that's the other fascinating thing about the Vanderbilts is within 100 years of the Commodore having more money than anybody else on the planet, you know, there was a reunion of Vanderbilts at Vanderbilt University in the 1970s, and there wasn't one millionaire among them. And that says a lot about the arc of an American dynasty. And that's why the book is called The Rise and Fall of an American Dynasty. How does that happen? How does it happen that one person at 11 years old starts working and amasses more money over the course of his life, creating 2 empires and steamships and railroads, and has more money when he dies than anybody else? And how does that dissipate within 2 or 3 generations. It's a fascinating tale.
But it was a tale Anderson had little interest in as a young boy.
I really, as a kid, just felt like no good could come of paying attention and thinking of myself as related to that family. To me, it was something, I'm sure I read about the Commodore Vanderbilt in, a class history book, but I just felt like it has nothing to do with my life, it has nothing to do with my family's life, and I didn't want people associating me with the Vanderbilts. I was very happy that my last name is Cooper. I'm still very happy that my last name is Cooper. That name Vanderbilt has a lot of baggage with it, and it comes with a whole set of assumptions, many of which are no longer the case. When people would hear who my mom was, I could see the sort of calculations going on sometimes in their head of like, oh, this means that this kid is really wealthy or he's going to inherit all this money. And my parents had made clear very early on that that was not going to be the case. Both my parents, my dad grew up poor in a farm in Mississippi, and they sat me down when I was, 8 or 9, and before I even knew what a trust fund was, and explained to me that, a lot of people are going to think that you have, you're going to inherit money and that you come from this family and they're going to make assumptions about you, but we want you to know that this is not the reality, and your mom has comes from a very famous family, and we do fine and we do very well, and your college will be paid for, but there's not some pot of gold waiting for you. And we think it's important that you find your own way and make a name for yourself. And I was all for that. It never occurred to me, certainly at that age, and I was really glad that they sort of made it clear to me that whatever I might hear about my mom, that's stuff about my mom, and it has nothing really to do with me. And that's the way I grew up feeling. And from then on, I very much thought, all right, well, I'm not even going to pay attention to the Vanderbilts because it has nothing to do with my reality. I'm a Cooper, and that's the model I want to follow.
Anderson's father, Wyatt Cooper, was an actor, screenwriter, and author who died in 1978 when Anderson was only 10. His mother, Gloria, was an artist, actress, author, and fashion designer who passed away in 2019.
My mom inherited a lot of money. She spent a lot of money. She made a lot of money on her own with jeans and perfumes and all sorts of things. And she also spent huge amounts of money all throughout her life. And my mom was extraordinarily unique, and I miss that uniqueness in my life. It was sometimes very frustrating and sometimes maddening and stressful because, she never had a plan for things, and she was incredibly creative, so things were always changing, and I was always having to adapt to what she, her new ideas, and encourage some of those ideas and try to sort of discourage her from some things that weren't all that practical or didn't make any sense. But I miss that, things that I thought at the time were kind of stressful of, oh, I got to deal with this and anxiety producing. I obviously now, of course, I miss that. I miss the random phone calls from her with a crazy idea. I miss her asking me ludicrous relationship advice, which, I'm certainly not anyone to give relationship advice, but I would give my mom feedback on when I was growing up after my dad died. She would go on dates, and I would give my mom feedback about what I thought about some of the guys, and some of them I didn't really think much about at all. I was not very impressed by, and I would let her know, and we had a really unique kind of relationship.
Growing up, Anderson also had an older brother, Carter, who tragically died by suicide at the age of 23.
Yeah, it's a part of my daily life. It's not, it's inconceivable to me that my brother died in 1988, and I've lived more of my life without him than I have with him. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about what he would be doing, who he would be, and still think about his death and questions about it, and it was the same with my mom. To the day she died, she was, we were both still stunned by what transpired and what happened, and there are some things that never can be answered, and you have to kind of find a way to live in that space of not knowing or not fully understanding. But But yeah, it definitely, it has definitely changed the trajectory of my life. And you know, I think about my dad, I think about my brother, my mom, every day, without a doubt.
Anderson and his longtime partner, businessman Benjamin Maisani, split up in 2018. 2 years later, in April 2020, when Anderson announced the birth of his son Wyatt, he also revealed the former couple planned to co-parent.
It's awesome. I mean, it's probably maybe an unusual setup, but it's you know, I knew he would be a great dad, and he is, and it's nice. I mean, we're exes, but we're family to each other, and we love each other and as family and as co-parents, and we both are besotted with Wyatt, and we get along great. He's more easygoing, and I'm wrapped a little tighter, and so I'm trying to be more easygoing. Yeah, I'm less fun. I think Benjamin's, so far, I think he's more the fun parent, and that worries me because I want to be the fun parent, so I got to work on that.
Wyatt is now nearly a year and a half old, and if there's been a silver lining to the pandemic, it's that Anderson has been able to spend a lot more of this magical time with his son.
It goes by so quickly, and you know, it's been, you know, I haven't traveled much during the pandemic, and that's been a huge, you know, in many ways, a huge blessing, because I've just been able to spend all this time with Wyatt. And you know, even I traveled recently to Los Angeles, I think for a day for a shoot, and I came back and he looked different. Like he had grown in that day that I was gone, or those 2 nights, and it is extraordinary how quickly it's going. I just want to like put him in a little box and keep him like a bonsai tree. Like he's so perfect right now. He's just like, yeah, he's just so happy and giggly, and waking up in the morning and being there when he wakes up and taking him out of the crib. It's just the best. It's so incredible. And I suddenly think like, oh my God, there's gonna be a time when like he won't let me just like kiss his face all over, and he won't let me hold his hand even. And yeah, I just like want to rub his tummy right now as much as I can, because I know, well, like at a certain point he'll be like, get away from me. The weirdest thing I've noticed is I look at pictures now of him from the first 6 months, and I'm like, who's that kid? Because it's nothing like that's not how I remember him being. I saw the pictures when they came out in People magazine. I was like, he looks like Winston Churchill. This is terrible. Like, well, that's not what he looks like. And now I look back and realize like, oh, that must have been what he looked like, because all the other pictures that I took and I thought looked completely different looked like Winston Churchill. So I don't know, and Benjamin was the same way. So I don't know what, like, it was some joint delusion that we had about what he looked like, that we were seeing him so much through the eyes of love that we didn't notice it was Winston Churchill. I want nothing more than just to hang out in his company, and I cannot get enough, even just looking at him. You know, I snuck into his room the other night, because I'd never wanted to wake him and stuff, and I snuck into his room the other night and just watched him sleep for, I mean, I don't know how long it was, but I remember watching The World According to Garp. Robin Williams was in this movie, and I love the book, and by John Irving. And there's a scene in The World According to Garp where Robin Williams leaves his house.
Bye, Dad.
That's a babysitter? To finally go on a date with his wife, you know, because they never go on dates. They get a babysitter, and they get in the car to drive away, and Robin Williams sees through the window the babysitter and the son playing, and he looks at his wife, and the wife instantly knows that they're not going to go to dinner.
I see. We're gonna stay here and look at the kids. This is some date.
He just wants to sit there on the whole date and just look through the window watching their son. And I totally get that now. I don't really want to project anything onto him in terms of what I would like him to be. I'm just enjoying kind of seeing who he is already, and I feel like it's all in there. There's always that question of how much is nature and how much is nurture, but I'm just stunned at how much of a little person he already is, with, you know, a sense of humor and a sense of mischief, and those aren't things that I've taught him at all. It's just part of who he is. And I love seeing that emerge. And that's what's so great about this age is every day you see some other little thing emerge and you think, wow, that's like, he's all in there. Like it's just, he's trying to figure out the language to kind of talk about what's in there. But it's, that's so exciting. So, you know, whatever of my mom and dad and my brother, you know, are in him, are already in him, and we'll see. But yeah, I just want him to have a happy childhood and, you know, stable surroundings and, you know, boring, stable surroundings and, you know, a little bit of excitement every now and then, but, you know, I want him to grow up and figure out who he is.